What's up, Gamecock fam? Wes Mitchell here, GC Live, Friday free-for-all edition of the show. No Chris Clark today. Shout out to Carolyn, his wife. It is her birthday weekend, so Chris and her are off the show today and going to sort of check out some time out of town, I guess. So you got me, and then you got Collyn Taylor joining a little bit later on. Collyn is finishing up I believe a press conference, but is going to hop on with me a little bit later on. Collyn, much more dialed in than I am to the basketball scene at South Carolina and, of course, the baseball scene at South Carolina, and is going to come on to talk about that. Of course, we'll still talk a little bit of football as well, and Collyn's going to be joining me here shortly. Nick Terrio says, man, I never know when y'all are coming on. I know. Sorry about that. I know we've jumped around on times. It's been very hectic trying to follow the coaching searches and all this stuff. So we have jumped around as far as the different times that we do the show. We're looking at possibly locking in this noon time slot as being sort of the time that we roll the show from now on. And then maybe we adjust that when it's football season again. Real quick, I see Collyn is down there. I'm going to bring Collyn in here shortly. Got to throw a shout out to our buddy Clint Hammond of Mortgage Network. He is our presenting sponsor of the show. He makes the show possible. Check Clint out, mortgagenetwork.com/Clint-Hammond, or give him a call, 803-771-6933. Whether you are a first-time home buyer or whether you are an experienced investor, give Clint a call. He'll get you hooked up with a great interest rate. As Collyn Taylor knows, never a better time than right now to buy a house because interest rates are incredibly low. So hit Clint up, 803-771-6933. See Hammond at mortgagenetwork.com. As I said, we'll bring him in now. He is Gamecock Central's Collyn Taylor. Collyn, I know there's a lot going on, man. Baseball scrimmages, I guess, starting up this afternoon. Baseball now has their first pitch date set, at least if COVID cooperates, and always men's and women's basketball going on this time of year. And we're still all trying to figure out what the heck's going to go on with this football staff, man. So I'm glad you're able to join us. I believe you're what, in between basketball presser, is that right, and then baseball scrimmage?
Yeah, we got just finished up the player availability for hoops and got a baseball scrimmage later this afternoon. And baseball scrimmages, I guess today's Friday, so Saturday and Sunday, and basketball Saturday, and then basketball again on Wednesday. So grind never stops, as they say.
Yeah, lots going on, man. So appreciate the time here. Appreciate everybody that's already joining us in the chat line there. Again, sorry that we jump around for the time. It's just that's the way we've had to do it right now in order to keep having a show. Happy Friday to you as well, Miss Lynn. James, yes, if James or anyone else would like to sign up for GamecockCentral.com, you can still use the code Gamecocks to get 50% off your first year. That's not a code that we're actually promoting very much right now. It's not one that we're pushing, but since it's Friday and I'm feeling nice and you all have been nice enough to join us here on the show, I will let you know that. Just put in Gamecocks in the promotional field, and you'll get 50% off your first year, and then it goes up to the full $99 after that. But we think it's worth it, whether it's $50 or $100, because that's like not very much money per day. And we've got coverage of football recruiting, signing day coming up, and then, as I said, basketball and baseball. Collyn, first of all, is there anything newsworthy, anything breaking, anything we need to know from that player availability that you just finished up with heading into this basketball game for the men with Vanderbilt on Saturday night?
Outside of how they've handled the Trey Hannibal, Trayvon Minott, and Trey Anderson naming snafus, no, everything seems good to go there, and the game's on, and South Carolina's traveling up there today.
And I mean, the game is on is actually, we never thought we would say this, but that's actual news. You know, that's a question we have to ask for every single freaking game in every single sport right now, unfortunately. So, especially with the South Carolina men's basketball team dealing with this cloud of COVID consistently being over their head. I do think it's important to point out that it hasn't been, and I've done some checking on this. I don't cover basketball day to day like Collyn does. He knows way more about the inner workings, but I do have a couple people that I talk to involved there. It's important to point out it hasn't been that these guys have been like going against COVID protocols and have been, not doing what they're supposed to do based on everything I've heard. It's been more like maybe a guy or two has had it, and then you have all this contact tracing that goes on. And it's been more, I believe, that South Carolina has followed the protocols to a T, which means you wipe out half of your team with maybe one guy having a positive test or two guys having a positive test. So it's happened multiple times, because of that. You feel for the kid. I feel for the kids, man, because they're having to do tests 3 times a week. It's been constantly interrupting their season. In basketball, dude, it's got to be nearly impossible to stay in shape if you're constantly getting shut down 2 weeks at the time.
Yeah, and I think what not a lot of people realize about this quarantine thing is when you get popped for contact tracing or you test positive for it, God forbid, you don't just get to hang out. You can't go for a run. You can't go for a walk. You're trapped in a room with, no real cardio to do, and you lose shape that way. I mean, you when you're like that for a week, you lose shape, let alone, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or a month like they were. And the start or stop doesn't help with that in any way, shape, or form. And that's a factor. That's something that they needed to get over. And, whether that's getting more practice time or conditioning once you're able to get out of your apartment and do things, that helps. But yeah, I feel for these guys on this team. And, you sit there and when they brought them back to campus for school and for the season, you told them, listen, you're going to have to be sequestered. You're going to have to be away from your student body, but you're going to get to play basketball. So there was a little bit of silver lining there. And then when you take that away from them, that affects guys mentally. And I think that you've dealt with a lot of mental health problems because guys have had the thing that they loved the most taken away from them for, 3 different stretches of time.
And man, I tell you, so it's one thing to be in shape for like you or me to go for a run or something, or to do a little bit of physical activity. Completely different story to be in basketball, like game shape, or shoot, man, to even be in a Frank Martin practice shape. Yeah. I imagine from what you hear about what those guys go through there. So feel for them in that case. I know one thing about Frank Martin teams is defense has always been a focus, and I know Frank has a very I would say somewhat unique or detail-oriented defense that it seems like it takes sometimes time for these guys to sort of gel together and learn what they have to do on the floor together within his defense. We saw a couple of games there where it was not a Frank Martin defense at all as far as the results go. What was the biggest difference for you, man? Hearing from Frank Martin, what you saw with your own eyes, what you heard from the players. What was the biggest difference in that win over Georgia? Because obviously that was needed coming off of a losing streak. And is that something they can replicate moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, they kept it really simple. I mean, you had that Auburn game where you just did not look good really on any end of the court, especially defensively. And I mean, Frank Martin went home and he didn't even watch the film on it and scrapped it and said, listen, we're going to do something new defensively. And they simplified things. They made it to where, ball screen defense, I could try to get into finer points, but they're not having to make 3 or 4 different calls depending on the game plan. They're defending your ball screens one specific way. That way there's no confusion. And that's helped They're not pressing as much right as they get across the half-court line, which certainly helps keep guys set in their defense. They're playing more zone, which I think really helps this team a lot, just because of their length and their athleticism. And, I mean, I don't think you can discount how keeping it simple has helped them. They looked much better. They looked more comfortable playing fast, which they really didn't do defensively speaking in any of their 3 other games. So, yeah, I think this is certainly repeatable just because of how simplistic, and that's not a bad thing. When I say simplistic, it's not, a dumbed down version. It's just a very simple version to keep guys playing fast. It's easily repeatable, and you hope that can continue against Vanderbilt this weekend and then onward, because you got some tough games coming up after this weekend.
Yeah, I have said many times on this show that I hate the phrase must win because I think it's completely overused. But if you look at, and sometimes it's a must win because, it's a huge game and both teams are ranked, both teams are playing well or something. Other times, though, I look at this game this weekend and I just see that Vanderbilt has not won an SEC game since they beat South Carolina March of last year. And they're 0-for in the conference this year. South Carolina obviously has to collect as many wins as possible in limited opportunities, again, going back to COVID. What is your take on this game, and what does this game mean as far as the different rankings and the net and all that stuff as well? Have you sort of had a chance to dive into that? And the other side of that, though, a loss. It's more like, hey, a loss here would be devastating for any of South Carolina's chances, just because it is a game that should be very winnable for South Carolina. Now, the caveat is you're going to Vandy. It's that such a weird arena, weird court, just weird setup, and it's a late game. I caught Frank talking about this a little bit on the Collyn show yesterday. He's like, you just sit around all day. So you're trying not to be sluggish. You're trying to stay juiced, but you can't go do anything, again, COVID. So it's not going to be an easy game. I'll go ahead and say that. It probably will not be easy, even if Vandy is 0-for in conference. But how do you sort of frame this game up for us, Collyn, to the side of the fact that you can't lose this game, basically?
Yeah, I mean, losing this game, I don't think South Carolina's necessarily had a truly bad loss this year compared to what they've had in years past with Stetson or Wyoming. I mean, they haven't really had one of those. The SEC teams they've lost to have been good SEC teams, and Liberty's an okay team, and Houston's obviously a top 10 team in the country. This would be a bad loss. Vanderbilt is, I mean, bottom half of the SEC right now, obviously, and not great in the net or not great in KenPom rankings. So South Carolina needs to win this game. Just to say, good teams beat the teams they're supposed to beat. South Carolina is favored in this game on the road. So that's something that they need to win this game. You need wins. I mean, at this point in the season, you're a team that needs wins. You're a team that needs to get some positive momentum going. You haven't won back-to-back games back-to-back SEC games this year. So you need to build some positive momentum, and Vanderbilt's a good way to do it. They're not good defensively, last in the SEC, about middle of the pack in offensive efficiency, literally 7th. But they have a really good guard in Scottie Pippen Jr., who spells his name differently than his dad, but goes by Scottie Pippen Jr., which is interesting to me. And then Dylan Deason, who's big that, I mean, they've had problems with. I mean, Scottie Pippen shot 16 free throws last year against South Carolina in that final game. So they've struggled with point guards, good guards this year, and will need to be better there. But it's a team that South Carolina should beat, and a team that it's not going to be easy because you have a good point guard in Scottie Pippen Jr. and you have a good big man in Dylan Deasu that can cause problems. But South Carolina, if they play like the way they did against Georgia, then they should have a really good chance to win this game.
By the way, if y'all have any questions for Collyn on basketball or baseball, we're going to get into some baseball here in a second. Go ahead and throw them in the chat. Miss Lynn wants to know, Collyn, does Vandy have the best home court advantage? Obviously, I think home court advantage in basketball this year seems to be almost nil as far as the actual atmosphere, and stuff like that. But you've been covering basketball now for a while, Collyn. How much of an effect does that just weird setup have on teams? I don't know. Is it logistically as far as communication? Is it just the weirdness of every other court being set up a certain way, and then you go there, and I don't even know how it's legal, honestly. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's top probably 5 in the SEC. I've never been to Arkansas, but I've heard stories about how good that arena is. Rupp's obviously, Kentucky, insane. And then I'd probably have Vanderbilt in that next tier, just because it's so unique. I mean, the court's elevated. The benches are obviously on the baseline and not the sideline. Guys have to scream to hear each other. I mean, it's just weird, and it's literally a converted opera house. Like, they took an old opera house and made it into a basketball court. So the acoustics are weird. The vibe in there is weird. It looks still like an opera house. When you're not sitting baseline, if you're media, you're sitting in some suite and you can't see the scoreboard. I mean, it's just all of it's interesting. So I would say Vanderbilt, just from an oddity standpoint, is one of the more unique and harder places to play, just because it takes you out of your rhythm a little bit.
Right. So let's talk about maybe a couple of guys that I think are worth pointing out or maybe focusing on a little bit. Keyshawn Bryant, man. I mean, this dude has always had the attention of the fans, media folks, and the flash has always been there. Like, this is a guy that's going to end up on top 10 plays at least at some point during the season because of his crazy dunks and incredible leaping ability, blocking ability. But to me, has maybe started to play his best overall basketball and seemed to maybe be more bought into like playing team ball and being even maybe more, seemed like maybe a little bit more of a vocal leader potentially on the bench. What have you seen from Keyshawn Bryant, particularly this week, and maybe his growth as a player from being this just incredible athlete who makes some plays for you to maybe we're seeing the complete basketball player potentially shine through?
He doesn't shut up, and that's a good thing. Keyshawn Bryant does not shut up, and South Carolina needs a guy like that to where he's a leader. That's certainly evident. He's pulling guys away. Like, if Frank Martin gets on somebody during the middle of a game, Keyshawn's the first guy that's going to pull him away and say, Frank, I got this, and end up yelling at him. You need that team leadership. And from a play standpoint, I mean, he's been unreal. I remember talking to his trainer over the summer that he worked with, and he was like, listen, Keyshawn's not going to shoot 35 to 40% from three consistently over the course of a season. But if he can make one or two and force guys to play and play him out and give him some more driving lanes, it's game over. And you've seen that. His jump shot's better. Teams have to guard him outside of the paint more. They can't just collapse on him when he drives. And that's opened up a lot for him. And I think that his scoring's obviously been so insane. I mean, I think 22 points in SEC play alone. And but you look at the other stuff. He's rebounding at a high level. He's passing the ball at a high level. He's forcing turnovers. He's doing everything that you want. Arguably, he's their star right now. You want your star player to do. And if he can continue to play like this, I mean, if he's still coming off the bench, he's in the running for SEC Sixth Man of the Year. If he keeps this pace up, and if he's back in the starting lineup, I could see him earning some second, third team All SEC honors.
So, all right, like we talked about, Collyn, tomorrow night, huge need to beat Vandy. I would say have to beat Vandy if they're going to sort of stay in any type of NCAA tournament picture. So that leads me to this question: Where are they? Are they in this conversation? What needs to happen moving forward? Because it's difficult to get in anyway, but it's almost hard to even process or to even know exactly what it's going to take this year because they've played so few games. And I think you look back and you maybe are going to one day circle that LSU loss when they played well for most of that game and had a lead for a lot of that game and couldn't quite put it away at the end. And that's going to end up being huge. But what needs to happen, in your opinion, moving forward for them to at least be in this conversation for postseason?
Well, they need to play better defensively. They started with that against Georgia. Georgia's not necessarily a juggernaut. I think that'll go down as a quad 3 win right now. I think quad 3 at home, quad 2 on the road. They need to play better defense and win basketball games. I mean, they're out of it right now just because they're 4-5 and they really don't have a marquee win yet. I mean, the teams they've played and won, they've dominated outside of Florida A&M, their first game back in a month. So you need to win games, and you do that starting at Vanderbilt, which is I'm looking at right now 143rd in KenPom. Then over your next 3 games after that, you have the top 2 teams in the SEC, in Florida on the road and Alabama at home. I mean, and then sandwiched in between there's Mississippi State. So if you can beat a Florida on the road, that's a quad 1 win. If you can beat Alabama, I mean, that's probably the best win maybe anyone's had in the SEC this season. If you can go and beat Alabama, who's top 10 right now and in every conceivable category, it feels like. So there's some chances for really good wins down the stretch here, but you just have to win these games, and you have to avoid having results like you did against Missouri and against Auburn, where you just look non-competitive for parts. If you can fix some of the things defensively that have plagued you, which they did against Georgia, and win basketball games, then you have a shot at getting at least into the conversation for the NCAA tournament or the NIT.
Well, and if Frank Martin's teams have showed us anything over the years, is that they will they'll drop some games, especially early in the season, that maybe they shouldn't, but they'll also win some games when people don't really expect them to. So I will never count this bunch out. I do think they've been highly affected by all the starts and stops, and there's no way to know what this season. I know people are tired of excuses, but it's the honest truth. There's no way to know what this season would have looked like for a lot of teams, really, without the starting and stopping and dealing with everything else off the court. So let's switch gears. Baseball scrimmages this weekend. I saw that baseball. I glanced at the release, Collyn. From what I understand, some of most of the out of conference games already are locked in. Is that right? Or
yeah,
is the whole schedule locked in?
All but one weekend series is locked in.
Okay. So we do know this. 2021 baseball season starts very soon. It's right around the corner. South Carolina will host Dayton February 19th through the 21st. That's, of course, a 3-game series there. Midweek game against Winthrop February 23rd. And then you have, obviously, the big early season matchup, Clemson. That's February 26th at Clemson, February 27th at Fluor Field in Greenville, and then February 28th here in Columbia at Founders Park. And I'll give you a general softball here first, Collyn. What did we learn earlier this week? I know that Kingston spoke to the media. What's maybe your biggest takeaway? Any major notes from that media availability earlier this week?
I mean, the big thing is how confident he is in this team, and them not really shying away from expectations at this point. I mean, they feel like they have a really good team with the returners they have coming in, and this, I guess, top 10 recruiting class that can make an impact really early in their careers, they have a feeling that this team can do some damage. It's a team that they're very confident. I mean, I asked Mark Kingston, how do you manage expectations with, being a top 25 team in the preseason? And Kingston very bluntly said, listen, if they're happy with being a top 20 team, then they're in the wrong headspace. That we don't strive to just be a top 25 team anymore. We want to go to super regionals. We want to go to Omaha. And we want to win the national championship. That's our goal at South Carolina. And they're not shying away from that this year. They have a few questions in the lineup in terms of who's going to start where. Center field being a big one. They have some options in the outfield. And third pitcher is kind of not up in the air, but there's still needs to be some set in stone stuff there right now. Julian Bosnick is the leading candidate as the Sunday starter, or really Saturday starter if they want to go right, left, right on the weekend, and then put Brandon Jordan probably at the Sunday role, and then figure out your midweek and your bullpen roles. But I mean, other than that, this is a team with some experience. They need to get better about that, and they need the freshmen to come along and prove that they can compete week in and week out in the SEC. But it's a very talented group, and a group that this coaching staff is very, very optimistic about in terms of having success and being able to get not only to the postseason, but win some games in there.
Congrats, Collyn. You just got your first tip here on the show. Shout out to Jeffrey throwing $2 at Collyn. I don't think you can. There's not many beverages anymore that you can buy with that $2, but
I'll take a double. I can get a McDouble lunch now. There we go.
There you go. That's your at least part of your lunch taken care of there. So shout out Jeffrey. Appreciate you, man. Let's go out to Bruce now. He says, I keep hearing how good our pitchers are this year. Is this one of the best staffs we have had in years? Collyn, I'll turn that one over to you, but I also want to add in, obviously, I think it's going to be a really good staff, but comparatively, and I don't know how much you've maybe had a chance to dive into the rest of the conference as well. I think one thing we're going to have to remember this year is that there's always stacked teams in the SEC, but everybody in this conference, or most of the teams in this conference, have probably been able to stack their rosters a little bit more this year compared to other years because of the situation with the MLB draft and it being much shorter. So how maybe does this compare to some previous South Carolina staffs, but maybe even more importantly, how is it going to compare to the rest of the South Carolina opponents they're going to face all year,
Yeah. That every time I try to check on how good this team is going to be and try to get a vibe for what it feels like inside the program, I'm like, well, how good can this team be? And it's like, well, listen, we can be good, but Vanderbilt's going to be good. Ole Miss is going to be good. LSU, Florida, all these teams are going to be good because the same situation. Now, South Carolina probably benefited more from the MLB draft than anybody else did, but other teams benefited too. I mean, Florida got Tommy back. Vanderbilt has all these. I mean, Vanderbilt's Vanderbilt at this point. Do I think this can be one of the best SEC top staffs in the SEC this year? Yeah. I mean, I think it's easily a top 4 or 5 staff from a depth standpoint, from a top end of the rotation standpoint. Absolutely. I think South Carolina's had some pretty dang good pitching staffs in its history. But I think this one is probably, I would say it's easily the deepest of the Mark Kingston era by far. Just when you look at Thomas Farr and Brandon Jordan as 2 guys that turned down money to come back to school. And then you mix in a Julian Bosnick, then you mix in Daniel Lloyd and Cam Tringali and Brett Carey, who's been so good the last, 2 years. And then you also add in a Mag Cotto, Will Sanders, a Jack Mahoney, a Jackson Phipps, 4 top 200 prospect guys coming out of high school or freshmen this year. And you add, Andy Peters and CJ Wines, 2 JUCO guys that are good pitchers. You start to feel good about the depth and the ability to compete week in and week out in a 3-game series with, for lack of a better word, the big boys in the SEC. And you need the freshmen to come along. You need Mag Cotto, the 4 guys I just mentioned, to pitch like top 200 prospects at a high school. But yeah, it's deep, and it's a staff that should keep South Carolina in a lot of games this year because of not only its velocity that they're throwing, but I mean the breaking balls and the makeup of the staff. I really like heading into this year.
And obviously, Collyn is way more tied in than I'll ever be with baseball. But I will say, one of my buddies that's tied in with the Blowfish just could not stop talking about Will Sanders as being a guy who can really possibly help this team and just has a really bright future, I think, moving forward. So, anytime you have this combination you're talking about, returning guys, some JUCO, maybe first, instant impact type guys, and then some freshmen that are kind of just being thrown in the fire, and you just, hey, let's find out, throw them out there and see what happens. Who do you like on the back end? Who do you think sort of is going to settle? Will there be a true closer, you think, Collyn? This may not be answerable yet, but at this point, is that more by committee? Is there one guy you think is locked in, like, hey, we're giving you the ninth man, here's the ball, like, go shut this thing down?
Yeah, I mean, Brett Carey's probably your closer going into the season. Not a guy that's going to blow you away velocity-wise, but can locate, just has, for lack of a better word, a word that I'd probably rather use, but he has moxie. And that goes a long way as a closer. He's fearless, and I think he's going to be, until he proves otherwise, he's your closer. And then Daniel Lloyd is a guy that they're probably going to use on the back end as a setup man or something along those lines. He's been good in the fall, and we'll see him this weekend as well. And Cam Tringali is another name. CJ Wines, the JUCO guy, who's going to play and has a kind of a wonky delivery that helps get him out. And Andrew Peters. You feel really good about where they are on the back end, but Brett Carey's your closer until he proves otherwise. I'm going in with Brett Carey as your ninth inning guy.
Sweet. So lots of these spots, I guess. There's good competition, but there is depth. Some of these slots, you think about your Friday guy there with Farr. Some of these slots, it's always good that if you're from Kingston's perspective, that they go in maybe not completely locked in, but that you have a good idea of where these guys are going to play, and that you're not sitting there saying, hey, we have no idea who our Friday guy is. You mentioned outfield, though, particularly center field, as being one of those spots that maybe isn't quite locked in. Some, a lot of good competition there, I think, maybe between some guys that are coming back versus some guys who are new. How do you see who are the guys in that competition right now in the outfield?
Yeah. So Brady Allen's going to be out there regardless. It's just a matter of where they want to play him, whether that's in center field or right field, where I think he's probably more better suited for right field than maybe center, but he can play some center if they need him to. Andrew Eister and Joe Satterfield are probably competing for that left field role. Eister's going to be in the lineup, whether that's at DH or whether that's in left field. I think he's going to do a little bit of both this year. And then center field, you kind of have some options. Noah Myers is the incumbent, but Brandon Fields, man, I think he's considered the highest rated player to enroll at South Carolina in the high school ranks since, I want to say, Sam Dyson. Just in terms of how good, or something along those. He's a top 5 in terms of his ranking, and is uber athletic, can hit for power, has speed. Still a work in progress defensively. Not saying it's bad. He's a freshman. Still needs to cut down on some strikeouts, but man, when he makes contact, you know it, and he does a lot of damage. And, I think, if I was filling out a starting lineup, if the season started tomorrow, I'd probably have Fields in center, just because of the upside he gives you. But Braylon Wimmer can play out in center. They'll try him out there, and Noah Myers are two other guys that are competing for innings. And if you need be, then you can put Brady Allen in center and have someone else take another corner spot. But they have options, which is the important part.
All right, so season right around the corner, Collyn. Like you said, scrimmage this afternoon. And final thing on the baseball team, how important do you think it is for this team to get off to a decent start? Because I feel like, last year, before everything got shut down, I felt there was pressure on this team, like from the fan base. There's been pressure to win. Not the best start last year, and then not the best start, I guess, as far as rolling into SEC play. And you never just want to feel like you're treading water. I just, from the outside looking in, I feel like it would be massive for this team to have things sort of go their way to start the year and actually build momentum versus starting to, hear that chatter, starting to have to see it on Twitter. And I don't care. I know players say I don't look at it, I don't read it. They try to avoid it. But sometimes it's hard not to hear that type of chatter. So, my opinion, very important for them to start off pretty strong. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, you have Clemson week 2. I mean, if you can go out, and there's a lot of hype around this program right now, rightfully so. Preseason hype is coming with it. And you want your first 2 or 3 weekends of the season to go, all right, they're living up to the hype, or I can see why there was hype, and not, man, another South Carolina team that's fallen short of expectations. You want to get the hype going. You want to feel good. You want to be able to say, we're off to a good start, and you need to hit offensively. They've struggled and were up and down at times offensively the last 2 seasons, especially before last year got cut short. You want to show that you can hit consistently. You want to show that your pitching is what you thought it was in terms of just the depth and the skill that you have. You want to give fans something they want to watch. And I think that getting off to a fast start, especially week 2, if you can go out and take 2 or 3 against Clemson, or play really well and take it to late innings in game 3, I think this team's better than Clemson right now from a depth standpoint. But if you can go out and beat them and give fans something to cheer about, then you can start building momentum. It's easier to fix things or correct things when you're winning than when you're losing.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. Good stuff from Collyn, as always. If y'all want to check out his baseball coverage, come on over to GamecockCentral.com. Use the promo code Gamecocks. You can get 50% off your first year. And hopefully you're already a subscriber anyway. But if you're not, come on over and check us out. I know Collyn's got a lot going on. We're going to let him get out of here shortly. If I'll stick around for maybe 10, 15 more minutes. If y'all have questions, there's not quite as many people on here, I think, because of our time change. But if you do want to ask questions, I'll get to them in the next 10 minutes or so. Collyn, I'm gonna give everybody, by the way, a running backs coach update here in a second. But before I let you go, what were your thoughts on sort of meetings in quotation, Zoom meeting with Greg Atkins for the first time earlier this week? We got to talk to him, got to hear from him. I frankly was impressed. He's an old school type guy, but with a little bit. I said it like this. I feel like this is an old school guy as far as his approach to maybe coaching the position and as far as his experience, but he kind of had a new school vibe as far as like talking about loving his players and that they're a family to him. He's not that old school guy that's just going to hammer the players and be negative and, cuss them at all times type deal. He kind of, it was sort of, I had never listened to an interview. I'd never watched an interview. This is my very first time hearing from him. But what were your takeaways hearing from Greg Atkins for the first time earlier this week?
He is as football guy gets. Like, if you looked up football guy in the dictionary, it's a picture of Greg Atkins. I was impressed. I thought he came out and really showed why Shane Beamer called him a hellacious recruiter, why you could see players wanting to play for him. And the fact that he has a plan and knows what he's looking for is huge, I think. And I don't think we can really discount him knowing exactly what Marcus Satterfield wants and meshing well with that offensive staff, because he's worked with Satterfield before, done a lot of different things. And I think that that's going to help him. I think South Carolina got a good one. and being able to poach from Marshall staff that had a winning tradition. So I've been solidly impressed with not only Adkins but the staff that Shane Beamer's put together.
Colin, I sort of got the impression when he made that comment, I think it was the Corn Blutes question. He was like, I could talk about this for hours on end all day long. I got the impression that was not an exaggeration at all, that was just a fact.
Yeah.
And he was talking about he seemed a little bit sad that he had to leave the X's and O nerd out session with the rest of the offensive staff to come talk to us idiots. I think he was like very excited to get back to talk some X's and O's with his new buddies.
I think that if he could have, he would have rolled, like he would not hit the button to move the screen up to reveal the whiteboard underneath, but like tape it up and like move it and then be like, all right, dummies, here's what we were talking about, and like draw stuff on the board just to show.
Start drawing them up like this. This is a reach block. This is this. This is this.
We're doing pass pro when they're playing 3 technique on a 4-3 or base this, and that he was. I got the feeling he was very mad at us for having to ask him questions for 20 minutes.
Dude, I honestly would pay if South Carolina offered something like that, like a premium session where the coaches actually do explain some of this stuff. As a media member, I would honestly pay to hear a guy like Greg Adkins explain some of this stuff. So, all right, Collyn, good stuff, man. Appreciate it as always. We ran it baseball, basketball, and football. So we appreciate the time, man. I know you got a lot going on, but we'll let you get back to it, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay, man.
Absolutely. First of all, I need to let you and Chris need to up your background game because I got this nice, lovely piece hanging around in the background that you guys need to. The blank walls just aren't cutting it. You need to get some artwork.
Yeah. Well, I've got something planned. I appreciate you calling me out on that. I've got something planned. It's just so right now I'm in a different house and I'm still working on my office. Well, the router is on one side of the house, so I've got to actually run and because you have to plug in ideally or at least be close to the router to do this show and it not get not buffer a lot. So I've got to run the Ethernet through the roof and then down into the office so that I can plug in there. Right now I'm literally, they can't tell, y'all can't tell, I'm like in my kitchen, like living room, like dining room area, basically. So eventually,
there's a humble brag in there though about you being in another house. Like this is oof.
Yeah, well, I don't mean it that way, even though they like to call me out like that. But seriously, I've got a plan for the background. I've just got to get the office set up, and then I think they're gonna like it because it's gonna have some Gamecock Central touches to it. It's gonna have maybe a little bit of Atlanta Braves action, a little bit of everything. So I'm excited. I think I'm going to actually put up my vintage Derek Moore Panthers card, which I got my mom to find at the house. I legitimately have Gamecock's new what's his title, Collyn? It's a super long title. Character development or something like that. Yes. Director of making the Gamecocks run through walls, basically.
Cool when I like that.
Yeah, when Luke Day is not making them run through walls, he's making them run through walls. So, but I asked my mom, I was a huge Panthers fan when I was a kid, and he was on their expansion team. So I texted my mom, I was like, I think I have a Derek Moore card at the house because I had like every single Panthers player back then. And sure enough, I've got a card of his. So I think that's going to go behind me. It's just going to be random stuff. So I'll up. What do you have back there, man? You got.
So I'm looking at it now. There's obviously this lovely piece that I picked up. This is the one piece of art that Michaela has allowed me to hang. It was originally in our living room, and we did some rearranging over the weekend and hung some wedding photos. So We put this in my office. And then there's a shadow box up there of some of the credentials I've had over the last couple of years. So
you are a married man, dude. The fact that you get one piece of art you get to hang. Wait.
In public. But so in my office, I have more stuff. So like I have some Star Wars stuff over my desk that no one can see. And then some space stuff behind me.
Well, wait till y'all get that new house. Speaking of bragging, wait till y'all get that house y'all just bought. You won't be able to hang anything, I'm guessing. So
I get my office. That's pretty much the only thing I'm going to get to hang.
You get this one box in the entire house.
It's like the scene from Jerk when he's at the county fair. And he's like, you can pick anything from this wall, anything from these 2 shelves, anything from this 6-inch area. So
that's going to be you, man. All right, dude. Well, we'll let you get to it. Baseball scrimmage starts at.
They've asked us not to release the times, but later this afternoon, soon.
Okay. There is a scrimmage at some point today, and Collyn will type words about it, I believe, on Gamecock Central. So thanks, Collyn. Appreciate you, man. Have a good one, okay?
Take it easy, y'all.
Yeah, good stuff from Collyn. All right, so running backs update real quick. I mean, I hate to say it. There's not a ton to update on this. I will say Chris Foster, little bit new there. So Chris Foster, he's the Georgia Southern running backs coach and is someone that we've been tracking because we've heard his name come up quite a bit. The thing that's new there isn't necessarily tied in with South Carolina. It's more about Foster in general, and that's the fact that he is thought to be leaving Georgia Southern, whether he gets the South Carolina job or not. ECU has been after him pretty hard, apparently, maybe even from what we've heard, Chris and myself, maybe even has an offer from ECU. I get the impression that it's much farther along in the process with Chris Foster and ECU than maybe it has been with South Carolina and Foster. So that's something to watch there. Again, that name has been mentioned quite a bit. I think he's been highly recommended to Shane Beamer by some people, but that doesn't always mean this person is going to be the hire. From obviously Jay Graham was a name we heard a lot about early on. From what I understand, Jay Graham and Shane Beamer did talk, but obviously from all the reports coming out of Alabama, it appears that Jay Graham, according to like all their sites, is going to Alabama. I believe he's going to handle tight ends and special teams there. And it appears that maybe that move had already progressed to a point of pretty much happening before South Carolina had the change at running backs. With the change at running backs, it happened very fast. This wasn't something that played out over a period of time. It kind of popped up out of nowhere for Des Kitchings. And from what I understand, just was one of those situations where it was just too good of a spot, too good of a situation for Des Kitchings to turn down. Felt like he had to take it. It's an NFL chance for him. And I don't really think he would have left South Carolina for many other chances or any other opportunities maybe, but this one was just deemed too good to turn down. So it did sort of happen fast, but I do think the Jay Graham situation had already sort of moved forward with Alabama. And we'll see if that's made official today or not, if maybe he's someone to still track or if that one's completely a done deal with Graham and Bama. There's some other names we've been maybe keeping an eye on. Montario Hardesty, who is the Charlotte running backs coach and actually is someone that we had got sidetracked, that we had at least been tracking but haven't heard a whole lot about there. Maybe we'll have some other names to give you a little bit later on the site. E.J. Barthel, another one that we sort of have been tracking. He was the Panthers offensive assistant running backs coach and is now assistant O-line coach as well. Jimmy Smith, the Arkansas running backs coach. So it's kind of at the point where – and there's some other names out there that we have picked up on, but we haven't quite been able to put out yet. there's always sort of this line of whether you can put the name out yet or not that we have to walk. So I think we hopefully will have another update on GamecockCentral.com at some point this afternoon. And again, you can always use the code Gamecocks for 50% off your first year, or use the code GCPOD for 30 days free, 30-day free trial. So be sure to check that out. All right, y'all. I think that's going to do it. I got to get back to work, but appreciate the time, appreciate the support as always. If you're listening on the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe on there as well. That certainly helps us out. And I promise very soon we're going to hopefully be able to lock in a very specific time on the show and try to actually stick with that. I know we've been moving the show around a lot. For those of you who watch it live, I know that's probably not ideal. Our 2 o'clockers have probably been missing it. So we will try to lock in on that and let you guys and girls know that this is when we're going to do the show and try to stick with it from here on forward. All right, y'all. Appreciate it. Everybody have a great weekend. Everybody get some rest, and we'll see you on Monday.